If you asked me to describe the cyberpunk genre, I would summarize it as high-tech sci-fi dystopia, a world that looks functioning at a glance, but only because it is propped up on the bodies of a slave class, an underground of average Joes for whom every day is a desperate fight for survival. The cyberpunk genre is able to tackle a lot of themes because it straddles that space between sci-fi, the limit is your imagination world building, and a take our current world and move a few sliders to max, rooting in reality. It's an effective vessel through which we critique corporations, late-stage capitalism, and the inevitable standoff between human rights and profit-driven business. What if paramedics won't lay a finger on you if you're not a member of their exact insurance plan? What if your apartment auto-locks the second you're late on rent? What if 2 days of life-saving medication costs 1 day of work? What if adverts could be played directly into your brain? Some of those concepts might be sitting uncomfortably close to home for a few of you. It's a shame that you can't also get your arm fitted with a little DVD player so you can watch Hoodwinked on the go. It might take the edge off. Cyberpunk also links nicely to transhumanism, the idea that humans can and will transcend biological evolution using technology. Transhumanism falls along a spectrum, ranging anywhere from using medicine to overcome illness, to prosthetics, augmentations, through to cyborgs, robots, uploading your consciousness, and beyond. Whatever you can imagine. Cyberpunk sits in these furthest reaches. Bodies and brains can be augmented with functional and fashionable fixtures. You can swap out your limbs, change your eye, skin, and hair colour, implant weapons and tools, etc. As long as you have the money to do it, you can do whatever you want. This is interesting, not just because you can fasten a frisbee launcher to your forehead and give your dog the best day of its life, but because of the accessibility of beauty. And what does that mean? Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. First, I want to talk to you about the accessibility of learning. That's right, we're back with Brilliant, our longtime sponsor who is currently offering a free full 30 days of curated maths and computer science lessons, and 20% off annual premium subscriptions. Brilliant delivers a catalogue of expert-built lessons on desktop and mobile across the spectrum of STEM topics, like this one on how AI works. AI is currently being touted as this next big thing by so many companies looking to sell features I don't remember asking for. What I like about the How AI Works course is that it helps you understand the actual processes going on beneath the surface of this technology, so you can better understand its limitations and its actual useful applications. Brilliant consistently emphasises its dedication to using humans. Every course is crafted by an expert, and Brilliant doubled its course library in 2025, adding end-of-level reviews and personalised practice features to double down on the things you picked up. Using visual, interactive problem solving and personalised practice, you'll click with concepts you used to struggle with. To learn for free on Brilliant for a full 30 days, go to brilliant.org/merkkk, scan the QR code on screen, or click on the link in the description. Brilliant's also given our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant. This video was intended to be a shit on Cyberpunk Edgerunners, a 10-episode anime I think is as shallow as it is empty, like a dog bowl left out in the sun. But as I began to write this script and rewatch the anime to refresh myself on what exactly about Cyberpunk Edgerunners cranks my chrome, I realised that it boiled down to one thing, specifically Lucy. Not her as, like, a person, she seems perfectly lovely, but her story, her writing, her arc, it all majorly pisses me off. The show had a measly 10 episodes to tell a one-year story across a surprisingly large cast of characters, and none of them ever quite seem to get their time in the light, beyond David's mentor and cautionary tale Maine, who dies an omen of David's inevitable fate. The show never felt like it was getting to the point, despite frequently arriving at the point and fighting on it. As the story progressed, I found myself getting exhausted with the turns it was taking, and became increasingly alienated from our main duo, David and Lucy. Not in a that's the point way either, as much as I'd have liked it to be the case. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a tragic tale of young David Martinez who gets into crime, augments his body into cyberpsychosis, basically in-universe berserker rage, machine over matter insanity, a black mental hole out of which you will never be able to climb, bags hot girl Lucy, emotionally neglects her, and then dies in a gesture of futile sacrifice after she is kidnapped. I was told it would have me sobbing, and somehow I ended up pissed off. I think this show is crap. The story hinges its emotional crux on you giving a shit about a teenager who finds out he is uniquely talented talented in body augmentation. He can handle 10 times the augmentation of your standard person. He is warned by Braindance editor Jimmy Kurosaki, Braindances being super VR memories you can buy and experience, that over-augmentation ends in death or insanity about 100% of the time. Then he sees his mentor Main go mad and die by over-augmentation. Everyone thinks they're the exception, but they're not, David is told. And he's like, yeah, but I am the exception. David continues to augment his body, uses this to get rich, sees clear physical symptoms that he is overdoing it, symptoms identical to the ones his mentor manifested, refuses to downgrade despite his friends, girlfriend, colleagues, and even his financially exploitative doctor begging him to. His girlfriend gets abducted by a man desperate for a promotion, and David decides to do one last augmentation, turns into a TIE fighter, and dies during the mission to rescue her. I did not care. I'm sorry. I know that it's supposed to be a tragic tale about addiction to power, or success, or just an addiction metaphor played cyberpunk, but this isn't the kind of story that pulls at my heartstrings. I sympathise, sure. Like, I did hope that he would listen to reason, despite the fact that his support system should have realised saying, please stop, there is a 100% guarantee that you will face dire consequences, to the man who keeps insisting that he is too talented to face consequences, just isn't going to work. No one in that headspace is going to listen to you. They should have taken more assertive measures, maybe even just put him out and specced him down themselves, stripped him for parts like an old car. But I am not crying anytime soon over Mr. Blenderhands getting everything he wanted and then dying a preventable death that he was warned away from by his friends, colleagues, and professional associates for months ahead of time. Even during the final episode, there's this plot point where he is tricked into using the TIE fighter looking suit by the enemy masquerading as his girlfriend. But I don't know why they act like it was something he had to be manipulated into doing. David had just finished a conversation with colleague Rebecca, who had identified his near slip into insanity and begged him, for her safety and for the safety of their team, not to use his augmentations again on that job, and he immediately walked out and began using the augmentations again in front of her with a smile on his face. He pushes his limit way beyond what he knows will kill him, what his doctor has told him will kill him, but he does it anyway because he knows he's going to die, so who cares if he kills all of his friends in the process. Hey man, would you mind holding off on the cybernetic enhancements that are making you go insane? You're putting all of us in danger and jeopardizing the entire mission. No thanks, I really like using them, so I'm just gonna keep using them. Like, suit yourself, man, but my sympathy has expired. If you're going to have a protagonist become so selfish that he's just straight up cruel and careless, you should probably budget a few more seasons. I need more than 100 minutes with this guy to have enough reasons to, at best, back him up in his life decisions, and at worst, watch with tears in my eyes as he crumbles under the weight of his mistakes. As it stands, my bond with David Martinez was undercooked. I just kept wondering why everyone was letting this dickhead drive if he was going to keep insisting on running them off the road. Most fallen heroes begin as good or neutral, so it's standard to have an empathetic backstory. I understand why Ghetto breaks up with Gojo, I understand why Walter White keeps cooking meth, I understand why Tai Lung breaks out of prison, I understand why Captain Walker uses white phosphorus on civilians, and I will understand when Pym goes crazy at the smiling friends, because I don't understand why the hotel was his responsibility when they haven't even added him to the group chat. I rooted for David when he was getting bullied, when he was the poor kid at school, when his mum was failed by a medical system she couldn't afford basic human decency from, but as time went on, these allowances dry up. He stops being the underdog and just starts doing crime, which is fine, but if you're going to escalate his behaviour, then you can't keep running on the steam of a childhood and poverty he's long since overcome. There was never a moment in the second half of Edgerunners where I was hoping it would all work out for David. I just sat there waiting for the moment when I was supposed to start caring about this melt who had everything he could ever want and still wanted more. When he bags the woman of his dreams and then barely speaks a word to her for the rest of the series beyond trying to dump her when she asks him to stop putting toasters in his arms, I was like, oh yeah, I see why it only ever seems to be guys who tell me this is the saddest story they've ever seen. Yeah, I'm generalizing, but I am starting to appreciate why impossibly talented teenage boy gets everything he wants at the expense of everyone around him and then dies pointlessly for a woman who spends the final episodes either fully naked or as an item for him to go and retrieve wasn't exactly going to smash with my demographic. You may argue he was trying to save enough money for Lucy to go to the moon. It's $250k for a one-way ticket and their final job paid 1.2 million each, but I mean, they live in a penthouse mansion. Did David need to be augmented to death to achieve the funds? No, he was already making money with the augmentations he had. So what if it takes him 3 years to save enough instead of 1? The addiction to augmentations and the end goal of the trip to the moon are two separate things that I think this show fails to tie together. If he had a time limit that required him to push his bodily limits, I think that could work, but this kid is 17 and already destroying his body for a trip to the moon that he could have saved for in 3 years instead of 1. I used to almost exclusively watch Jenny Nicholson videos, so I was excited to make a numbered list of all the reasons why I think Edgerunners is buns. Unfortunately, the longer I sat here with my pen and paper, the more I realised that this video was never going to be a list of all the things I hate, because the thing I hate is the emotional foundation of the story. I hate the objectification of our female lead. 50% of the love story that forms the backbone of Cyberpunk Edgerunners is in the box, and this gangrenous leg corrupts everything it touches. Lucy is a MacGuffin. She is a prize to be won. She is the cold, standoffish, hard-to-get stereotype who greets David by stroking his face and chest, a walking contradiction of someone who the writers cannot decide how to make sexy, only that they need her to be sexy. She does the thing femme fatale characters do, where she disarms men by rubbing up against them. She is simultaneously extremely unapproachable and seductively physical. Her personal bubble is as impenetrable as the Iron Curtain, and gapingly open to men she's known for 2 minutes, because we only have 10 episodes to write this love story, and there's no time for a slow burn, so we're just gonna have to pretend. They want to write a tragic backstory for Lucy, but don't have the space to flesh her out in the present. So late in the series, we learn that she was an orphan child slave who watched her fellow orphans die under the exploitation of the Arasaka Corporation. But the series does not have the time or motivation to tackle this with care. All of her scenes present an object whose primary role is love interest and whose secondary role is eye candy, propped up on the shaky foundations of child exploitation, which is ironically very fitting, although probably not in the way the writers intended. Lucy was a child slave used by the Arasaka Corporation for something called net running. You are loaded into the cyber world and can walk around to search for information, like walking through a physical space. Net running is dangerous. The system sees you as a virus and will attack you. Her cohorts frequently die during these runs, and as a consequence of the surrounding Arasaka neglect. They were all considered expendable. As things got dire, Lucy and her friends decided to try one final escape. Better to die hopeful than to die a slave, they reasoned. As they ran for the exits, Arasaka security opened fire on them. They were all gunned down but one. Lucy was the only one who escaped, only to find herself homeless. The only options she had for survival were crime. She has no family, no schooling, and no other skills beyond hacking and net running, the two things that remind her most of what she's been through. The unfortunate reality is that she is the best netrunner on the team. Although there is another netrunner called Kiwi, circumstances occasionally force Lucy to netrun for the team. The first time this happens, she flies into a panic you'd never expect from a woman so stoic. She is really scared, but she asks David to reassure her that he believes in her and volunteers to take Kiwi's place. Netrunning, and her broader past, is a topic Lucy takes a long time to open up to David about, and we're given a short recap of what happened to her as a child. This is about as far as this thing goes for Lucy in terms of narrative depth, because the show has bigger priorities, namely getting her naked, getting her wet, and getting some camera shots of her panting for breath or standing around in nothing but a towel. Despite how netrunning represents everything she is trying to escape, an experience that, even at the mention, visibly upsets her, she climbs into the bath glistening and naked, panting, with the camera focused on her breasts. Her face isn't even in the shot. The focus is on how David is checking her naked body out. The emphasis is always on Lucy's body. The way the camera pans up from feet to face, the way shots linger on her steamy chebs. Lucy has a lot of potential, but she is kneecapped by being the obligatory love interest, because all emphasis on her childhood trauma needs to be run past the filter of Dave finding her sexy. Her unique value to the team is a really complicated and interesting thing to think about, but Lucy never talks about it, because the value of these scenes to the anime is in the fan service. You don't have to be naked to net run. There are net running suits, but naturally the only characters that net run are women, and they both insist on doing so naked. David even suggests that Lucy wears a suit, and she's like, no, my trauma from net running is so overwhelming that I have to do it naked. When they climb out of the bath, the two of them wander around naked in the company of the team, seemingly oblivious to their own nudity. You could argue these people are so used to augmenting their bodies that their skin feels like an outfit, it's just plates on their body, so nudity is an alien concept to them. But I think the fact that only women are sitting around naked tells a different story. If it's too intimate for gang leader Main to hang dong with the team, then there is an element of sexuality to being naked, and nudity does exist conceptually in this world, which does make it weird for these women to be drifting nakedly around the room. All I'm saying is equals pequals. Either everyone is okay to be nude or no one is. This kind of shameless sexualization pisses me off. With all this said, I'm sure you're excited to see what I think of Rebecca. Rebecca is introduced in episode 2. too. A petite woman with blue skin, beautiful pink eyes, and long hair reminiscent of Vocaloid star Miku Hatsune. And when I first saw Rebecca, I thought, oh boy, lolly bait. And I was not disappointed. Well, I was very disappointed, but I wasn't surprised. Not only is her frame small and her design girlish, but Rebecca's introductory scene sees her distract a local goon by spilling a drink on him and then impishly rubbing it off his crotch. Pretty sure I rolled my eyes so hard that I got a strain. In her second scene, she greets David in her underwear. I almost turned the show off right there. Yeah, critically acclaimed, but lolly tropes aren't my thing. I think Rebecca was initially pitched as a love rival, especially in the beginning few episodes, where she and Lucy have those fanfiction love triangle tropey introductions that I find hard to put into words, but if you know, you know. Like a couple scenes back to back, direct introductions with each character, time for the reader or viewer to soak up what they're about and start to build preferences before the writer goes on hiatus and then never uploads again. There is a half-hearted love triangle in the final product, but the show is too short to do much with it. Rebecca has a cute crush on David across the length of the show, and it's not really all that relevant beyond informing some of Rebecca's choices when it comes to taking a harder stance with David and his augmentation abuse, but it does feel organic and I did really like their chemistry. Rebecca's crush on David feels cute. She's the only one to speak to him at the gang post-job drinks. He helps her get around fastidious bouncers, they have actual conversations, she falls asleep on him, they work together, especially as the team numbers begin to dwindle. She's the only one he trusts to inject him with immunosuppressants and anti-crazy juice. She gives him an honest talk about how his augmentation abuse is going to kill him, etc. She and David built a genuine bond. More time is spent showing this closeness between David and Rebecca, even if it is only platonic on his end, than time spent showing David and Lucy growing closer. I assume this is why Rebecca's excessive sexualization has a hard stop around episode 4. Either that or because someone told the animators to cool off a bit. By the end of the series, hell, by the midpoint of the series, she was my favourite character. Rebecca is sexual, like she is conventionally attractive, but after her introductory scenes, she is not sexualized. I won't pretend that she doesn't lurk in that grey area between lolly bait and short 20-year-old woman that anime loves splashing around in. This is mainly due to the pigtails, which I feel tip the design scales into childlike, more so than her actual figure, which is that of an adult. Like, she has developed hips, and having smaller breasts doesn't automatically make you underage, but it is hidden by a big coat. Her figure is concealed. Regardless, I felt like she was the best character in Edgerunners by miles. Lucy's objectification worsens as the show progresses, whereas Rebecca becomes more defined. Her arc solidifies, her motivations become clearer. She deviates from her delicate appearance by augmenting her arms with huge meaty fists. She deals with losing her brother to a cyber psycho, and then she has one of the goriest deaths in the show. She is a character who dies for absolutely nothing in a horrible, mean-spirited, cruel way to try to save someone she loves, and despite her sacrifice, she fails. I love that. Compared to Lucy, whose purpose is to be won, owned, and saved, Rebecca is her own character with her own arc, and the show pulls zero punches in demonstrating what that looks like. Unlike Lucy, who simultaneously possesses a personal bubble the size of the O2 Arena and says hello to the average man by rubbing her groin all over him like a cat in heat, Rebecca just feels kinda real. She's not tropey, her dialogue is very natural. For example, you can tell she has a crush on David because of the way she approaches him and, anxiously speaks. She stands to his side and faces ahead so that eye contact is less intense, standing side by side. She's so sweet about it and so obvious, like there's a little voice in her head going, "Go for it, Rebecca, you can do it." Unlike Lucy, for whom the camera lurks around, ogles, and violates, shots of Rebecca are less voyeuristic. She is the subject in her shots, not the object. Although her outfit has its angles, the camera doesn't sit beneath her begging for an upskirt, tongue dangling out of its mouth. It doesn't linger on her tits while she's speaking about childhood trauma. It doesn't pan up her body while she's lying in the bath. Rebecca is the perfect example of a character who is attractive but not sexualized. Her firearm mastery gives her a selection of weapons to use that don't require Bayonetta-style gymnastics. I've seen Rebecca described as a lolly a few times in discourse, and if you held a gun to my head and asked me my opinion, I'm not an idiot, I see her design, and the show makes a concerted effort to show you how young this woman appears to be. There's an early scene where she is denied entry to a club on account of how young she looks, while the younger David swans past. I see the effort made to highlight the prepubescent nature of Rebecca's appearance in an extremely cramped 240-minute runtime, where every scene likely had to be carefully selected to make the most of such a big story across such a small period where so many crucial events happen. That was, to someone, an essential scene to include, and it's more time than she is given when her brother is murdered in front of her. Rebecca's brother Pilar's death is used as an opportunity for David to save Lucy's life, take her home, promise to take her to the moon, and kiss her under the night sky. We don't really see what Rebecca's going through, despite it being a pivotal moment for her character. Sorry Bex, we have to see what the world's most dead-eyed couple are flapping their lips about now. Still, intentional attractiveness aside, Rebecca is the best written female character in the show, and this is because she is able to sit outside of the central aim of being desirable to David, and by extension, the audience. Lucy, however, is a slave to the male gaze and the Dave gaze, and cannot operate outside it. David meets Lucy in episode 2, when she is stealing chips from commuters on the train. She notices David because he is wearing the Sandevistan, an augmentation he found in his recently deceased mother's possessions. Lucy is running with the gang of people David's mother was selling these augmentations to. Lucy realizes she is going to need to keep him busy until her team can get there to take it back. To do this, she has him help her steal chips, promising to split the profit 80-20. It soon becomes obvious that the writers could not decide which tiring trope to write Lucy through. She is the standoffish, ice-cold snow queen who needs to be thawed. She is the physical femme fatale who gets what she wants using her sex appeal. She is the manic pixie dream girl who, long story short, saves David from a gang who tried to steal his Sandevistan by riding the gurney they have him strapped to down a lit tunnel, laughing and squealing in his face with excitement as he stares at her in rapture. Something about this scene makes me cringe so bad that my feet curl and I can taste onions. They end up at her flat. She lies in shot in such a way as to emphasize the bulk of her coochie lips through her shorts. Yeah, I know, the camera is literally up her arse, the emphasis on her minge, and I could not remember what on earth they were talking about in this scene because I was too busy wheezing with laughter with my mate. During their time together, Lucy divulges an honest wish to go to the moon. She takes David into a brain dance where they skip around and enjoy the gravity and laugh together, but it's just a ruse to keep him distracted as her gang arrives. Lucy wears me out. Like, to my core. There is nothing to her outside of these 2D tropes. She is an object to be coveted, demonstrating whichever features David will find most attractive in the moment, even when those features are diametrically opposed. With so few episodes and so little time to tell a story, we never really get a sense of who she is. The icy snow queen, manic pixie femme fatale who wouldn't touch you with a 12-foot pole with a bit of cack at the end, but also says hello by grinding up on you like a nightclub regular. The problem with 10 episodes is that this is the only introduction to her that we get. The lies she tells David to earn his trust, the behaviours that may just be a way of tricking him into lowering his guard. She will admit later that her moon wishes were true, but there's no time spent laying out what kind of a person Lucy actually is beyond her initial fake persona until something like episode 8. She is constantly there to perform a role of titillating David and the viewer, and her writing will change to accommodate whichever trope the writers think will be most attractive in that moment. Beyond moments where they go running together, something Maine specifically requested so that someone is keeping an eye on David at all times, and sessions where Lucy runs ahead of David so that she doesn't have to speak to him. This is all the time the pair spend together outside of work. I don't think they have a proper conversation again until episode 6 or 7, by which point they have already begun a sexual relationship apropos of nothing we're actually shown, just told. Bizarrely, in the lead up to this dead fish of appearing, there are a few scenes where Maine asks David questions like, how are things with Lucy? Like this is some tangible slow burn love affair that everyone is watching unfurl with bated breath, and David flusters for a while. I was like, yeah man, how are things with Lucy? Whatever's happening, we're clearly not seeing any of it either. Before David, Lucy is an object, but Rebecca's writing teaches us that she could go either way. There's hope for her yet. Unfortunately, becoming David's girlfriend eradicates any of her potential. Lucy remains objectified by the show and becomes a woman who can only do what she needs to do as long as David reassures her that he believes in her. She becomes a passive damsel in distress whose job it is to wait around to be saved or recover from being saved, often naked. If she's not wandering around their huge flat naked, lying on their weird backless sofa naked, obviously backless so as not to sacrifice shots of her tits when she faces away from David, lying naked on their bed without the sheets on, or lying naked in the net running bath, she's been kidnapped by Faraday to lure David to his death. The camera crawls up her body from behind while she is watching David strangle his doctor, as though a shot of her ass is exactly what we need in a moment that marks David's turning point into certain death. We get a slow pan down her soaking wet body when Faraday strings her up after kidnapping her. She gets suspended in a sexy way and called a toy. When Rebecca is killed, we see her shredded corpse, and then we immediately get a shot of Lucy bent over, ass to the camera. It's such a strange choice to try and write a tragic story and have it just brimming with shots so gratuitous that it takes you right out of every scene. There are so many moments where Rebecca falls over or lands on David or leans towards the camera, and none of them are played for sexuality, so it is possible. Lucy is an object whose entire character is defined by how mysterious, unattainable, and sexy David finds her. In the first half of the series, she is a prize to be earned, and an item to be stolen back in the second. Her child slavery trauma is used as a crutch for more on-screen sexualization. Her dreams are a ruse used to make David trust her, and all the time spent with him is either at work or babysitting him, which lends itself to a woefully sterile romantic relationship. There is zero on-screen chemistry. Their entire relationship is him looking enraptured and her staring dispassionately like her new colleague is some sort of hamster. Watching them hang out is like watching someone rub two oven trays together under a single exposed hanging light bulb. Cyberpunk Edgerunners in many ways forced me to recontextualize sexuality and sexualization because it forced me to address the reasons why I liked the depiction of Rebecca and not Lucy, when Rebecca is clearly more of an issue. I mean, they're both women in their 20s who take a romantic interest in the 17-year-old David, and Lucy shags him, so she's a weapons-grade nonce anyway, but still. Rebecca is on some thin ice in terms of sexual appeal, and yet I thought she was twice the character they bothered to write Lucy as. And why did I think Kiwi was okay? She looks similar to Lucy, similar hair, similar frame, similar reasons to be nude, so it's clearly not the aesthetics alone that I have an issue with, considering Rebecca oozes all the trappings of typical lollybait at first glance. Although I will say that Lucy's outfit looks silly because the swimsuit high leg is supposed to elongate the body, but having a white band across the middle cuts her in half and makes her look disproportionate, I won't suggest that any of these women are sexualized in design alone when we consider the standards of the genre and setting. Showing extra skin is nothing extreme in Edgerunners. Lucy could show up in a pair of waders and still wouldn't be well written. There is so much about sexuality in a cyberpunk setting that's never examined closely, namely how transhumanism affects the beauty industry and societal standards for fashion across gender. I find that a shame. The cyberpunk genre feels really unexplored in that regard. Still, I can't blame the show for this. Edgerunners only has 10 episodes and the story is pretty A to B, so I don't blame them for not taking a nosedive into these themes. I just find it interesting myself to apply these transhumanist concepts to the show's world building and see which conclusions we can walk away with. Sexualization is derived entirely from intention, not presentation. Cyberpunk is so interesting because a person having fat tits and a big bum might feel like a hypersexual character design to us, but within the genre it's unremarkable. Beauty standards are going to be a whole lot different in a hyper-capitalist society where you can literally buy your perfect thighs, your perfect legs, your perfect arms. In Cyberpunk Edgerunners, it's pretty apparent that the more augmentations you have, the more attractive you are. So it's more about having neon thighs and an aquarium bum that's got a little goldfish swimming in it. Instead, the objectification is in how the camera frames the bum, what it pans up and down, which shots we're shown while characters are explaining their traumatic backstories, what the show considers more important for us to see than others. I like Rebecca because after the steam of her introduction wears off, her physical appearance is irrelevant to her characterization, her motivations, her future, and her outcome. She is a character who is small, and she ends up being the best written of the bunch, rivaled only by Maine. On the other hand, Lucy is something to be ogled and disrespected. Her childhood abuse is used as a vessel to have her walk around naked and be a damsel in distress. The show would rather pan up her legs and thighs than focus on her face. Even when she is kidnapped, she is strung up in a sexy style with the lighting emphasizing the curves of her thighs. It is such a miserable outcome for a promising character, but understand that I'm not arguing she's bad because she is sexy. She's bad because she is sexualized, and there is an enormous difference. I was recommended Cyberpunk Edgerunners as a tearjerker tragic love story between two unforgettable characters. What I found was a flimsily written premise sandwiched together with a heinously written female lead. Lucy's writing is the real tragedy of this show, emphasized by her constant narrative contrasts to Rebecca, who is given a broad, emotional, and satisfying character arc. Her death was the only death I mourned because, by the end, she was the only one who just wanted to get through this one last mission and see her friends safe. If Lucy was a side character, these these issues wouldn't be such a problem, but only because they would be less glaring, less obvious, and less impactful to the wider story of the show. As it stands, Lucy's bad writing is the emotional core of a story I didn't find tragic whatsoever, and you can't really engage with this show at all without having to take her into consideration. I initially sat down because I wanted to write a numbered list of pet peeves, like I wanted to get really unproductive about it. I wrote this over Christmas as like a small writing exercise. It's a lot simpler than the other videos I put out, and I was like, go on, be a hater, like it's a treat. Instead of being able to like rant and just talk unproductively, I feel like I've ended up being quite productive and given more constructive feedback than I wanted to give, and I mean, I still want to be really unproductive, so I think I'm ready to do a video about how I think the Dr. Sleep movie was really bad. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this one in the meantime. I'm making a couple small videos at the moment because I'm going to be moving house soon, and I want to work on a really big video in a few months, so I want to get a couple smaller things out that I've been kind of like sitting on for a little bit. This has been in the box for a while, and it's not really a full video's worth, it's just more of like a character discussion about a singular show. So yeah, that's why this was a little bit more simple than I'm sure you're accustomed to. I promise I'll go back to the bigger videos soon, just life's a little bit busy at the moment. I gotta get some stuff out, and this has been on my mind long enough that I think it's okay. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.